The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Welcome to Sarah's Country. It's wonderful to have you join us, and the privilege is always mine. Now, if you are new to the show, kia ora and welcome. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam. We love to discuss here at Sarah's Country the matters that matter most with our 4 guests each episode on the issues that matter to farming, food and fashion and paradise, New Zealand at the bottom of the world, Aotearoa. There are so many maps, did you know, that like to leave us off. I don't think it's on purpose. Of course, it's not on purpose. They just don't know sometimes that we exist. But, you know, even today, my digital producer, he was trying to set a device's time zone and there was no New Zealand on it. We continue to punch well above our weight in this world, and even sometimes from a very unassuming position. But we know that this is a special gem in the South Pacific, and our deepest focus is on producing food and fibre that the world wants, with a triple bottom line: people, profit, and planet. This is why I love what I do, why I am so passionate about the ever-evolving change that is coming our way. Do we embrace it or do we challenge it? Sarah's Country is an alliance with the amazing team at Farmers Weekly that bring you the most trusted source of agri-journalism in this country. And we try to bring this with open hearts and open minds, as change is inevitable, right? You know, they say if you're standing still, you're moving backwards. But what are some of those things that you really shouldn't change? To have nostalgia, to have things that make us who we are as people. It's so easy to continuously evolve and change, but sometimes there's things that make us who we are. The reason I want to talk about this today is I want to share this experience I had with you this morning. My first job, I went into the Lincoln Post shop. And for those of you who are not aware, Lincoln still has that awesome, beautiful, small rural town feel on the cusp of Christchurch, even though it's developing and it's changing. It's holding on to that feel. Your local butcher, baker, candlestick maker kind of thing. Well, not really. Hammer Hardware, NZ Post. But, you know, everyone knows your name, and it's a very loving place, especially for a lot of people to retire to. So beside me at the counter was an elderly gentleman who I couldn't help but overhearing. He was told he wasn't allowed to use his cheque to pay his power bill. So I sort of intently listened to the conversation. Of course, he was a beautiful, respectful elderly gentleman. And I heard him say, but I've been using cheques for 65 years. And I could just watch the lovely Indian New Zealand Post attendant try and help him through this process. And he wasn't challenging it. He was trying to get his head around it. And you could tell it was a big thing for him. And she was extremely helpful. He said, well, I have this thing. It's an EFTPOS card. And she said, is it cheque or savings? And he said, well, it must be savings because it's not coming out of my chequebook. And absolutely bless his soul, he turned to me and he said, you won't know how old I am. And I decided to not be too cheeky and say 21. So I said, you can't be much over 60. And he said he was 83. And then as he walked outside, I saw him climb into his immaculate old classic Jaguar. And then outside of the cafe was a large amount of classic cars and all of them coming together. And of course, reminiscing about days gone by and things that they do like to cherish and hold on to. And it gets me wondering and thinking, and I'd love to hear from you tonight in the comments. What are some of those things that you wish wouldn't change, that make us who we are? You know, because we do focus so much, especially on the show, about change. It's what we need to do to keep up with the consumer and keep up and evolve. I mean, music's one of those things, isn't it? Very much so, that it's very important to be able to hold on to some of those treasured memories and treasured styles and trends. So wherever you are watching and listening to us live, please, I'd love you to interact with the show. What is it that you wish wouldn't change that makes us quintessential Kiwis? Because at the end of the day, we are not just selling a story of scenery. We're actually selling a story of our lifestyle, how we live here in New Zealand. And this is what I'm starting to learn more and more from our marketers internationally who understand this. And people are buying into the story of how New Zealanders live. So let's remember that. So wherever you're listening in the comments below, I'd love you to join the show. Serious Country, of course, is on demand on podcast, and we do have to appreciate there is a huge amount of you that listen whenever and wherever on demand. So thank you so, so much. And if you'd like to participate Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday live from 7 o'clock across multiple different social media platforms, Farmers Weekly, YouTube, etc. But go to seriouscountry.com or farmersweekly.co.nz. Of course, all of the stories tonight are produced in alliance with the journalists from Farmers Weekly and that paper that comes out in your Monday or Tuesday rural box. Tuning in now to the stories to share with you tonight. After 7:20, we're going to be joined by Roger Parton from Rural Contractors. How are our agricultural contractors' spring labour shortage numbers? We are following this closely here on Serious Country. Last week, the government rejected a bulk application to Immigration New Zealand to help bring in these foreign workers that are highly skilled and desperately needed. I'm looking forward to also asking Roger about the huge delays that we're also understanding from a recent story online. We're sourcing overseas tractor parts and machinery is now also adding to the load. CEO for Potatoes New Zealand, Chris Claridge, joins us after 7:30, representing a number of different types of vegetable growers organisations that are a part of a cash injection of $4.7 million from MPI for a nationwide project set to transition crop production to more sustainable land management. And to close the show, a nationwide plan to tackle more than 800,000 hectares of wilding pine infestations over the coming year is hoped to generate 550 new jobs. This is the government's prediction and plan. However, Chris Allen, spokesperson for pest management for Federated Farmers, is going to join us to say, well, it's not enough and it shouldn't have happened in the first place. First up on the show, though, are our major milk processing companies, farmer suppliers, equipped with the right farm environment plan detail to satisfy the new national environment standards for fresh water? Synlait's National Milk Supply Manager, David Williams, will join us after the break to explain how the Lead with Pride program suppliers are on track. This is Serious Country. Well, ahead of the new national policy standards for freshwater that have recently come into play on the 3rd of September, are our farmers ready? For those in the primary sector will know that this isn't something new for our farmers, and many companies have been working on this for some time. One of them is Synlait. Joining us now is National Milk Supply Manager David Williams. Welcome to the program, David. Synlait is certainly leading the pack. It has been for some time when it comes to its suppliers' farm environment plans. The first question is, do your current farm environment plans match up with these new standards?
So, Sarah, we believe in terms of the actual what needs to be in a farm environment plan, they do. But there are certainly changes coming within the essential freshwater that means we'd have to adjust some of the standards and the things that are required in there.
What are some of those things that have sort of caught you out that you weren't expecting, perhaps?
Well, I guess are things such as the maximum of 190 kilograms of urea per year, some of the winter grazing requirements, and a few other things as well.
So how will Synlait work? And particularly, let's talk about first your top farmers. They're particularly, I understand 50% of Synlait at least are on the Lead with Pride program. How will what's their sort of attitudes towards these changes? Are they embracing them, or is it still just going to be too hard?
So they've, I guess, come a long way already. So they've already, we've had this program in place for a long time, and they've, what they have embraced is really identifying their environmental risks on their farm, and then we've worked with them so that they understand those really well, and they've come up with a plan to mitigate them the best they can, and continue to do that in the future, and in a way that it can be easily seen from the outside that that's been done. So they've come in a really long way. So in some ways, these changes are just a little step, although some of them are definitely going to be bit more challenging, such for people that already have a farm environment plan in place, I would suggest.
So let's work through some of those key things, in particular winter grazing and the pugging depths. Do you believe there is an ability to amend farm management systems and feeding out to be able to accommodate? So
that area is a little bit confused at the moment, because there's been some changes around it, and it's still up for debate, some of those things. I think it's fair to say, Sarah. But I think within the current farm environment plans farmers have got, they are already trying to address and identify those risks. Whatever comes into play, we'll have to work with. But I think we're already a long way towards it.
Looking internationally, how do Synlait's farm environment plans stack up in comparison to other milk supplying countries? Sorry.
I think what we do stacks up really well. I guess one of the unique things about Lead with Pride is that it also covers people employment on farm as well, and other social areas, and it also covers animal welfare as well. So in many ways, covering that people area makes it quite unique. And the other aspect of it that certainly takes the time is that part of the program is not just coming up with your plan. You actually have to document your plan, which kind of takes farmers through a process where they have to really think about the very best way to meet the best practice requirements that we have within Lead with Pride, which is can be quite a long and hard process for farmers, but the outcome is really good, because they come out the other end feeling like they're doing the best that they can do, and feeling like they're ready to or already are meeting or ready to meet some more of these requirements as they come along.
What is Synlait doing to support its suppliers in being able to create farm environment plans and make it easier and less costly?
So we provide an enormous amount of support that is free of charge for farmers to create the farm environment plans, which are essentially part of Lead with Pride for us. That's how it works. So we have 5 area managers across the country who a big part of their role is taking farmers through the Lead with Pride certification process, and also keeping them there, so once they've met those standards. And as well as that, we have 3 environment advisors across the country as well. So that's about 1 to 100 farms, and those guys are kept very busy keeping ahead of what these requirements are, and also finding out what the best, what some of the best ways are to mitigate them, so they can help farmers create the best plan for their individual farm, so they can manage those environmental risks.
Through the consultation process on the new environmental standards for freshwater, was Synlait sort of at the table, and do you feel that you were heard by this government in ways that amendments could be made to accommodate the great work that you have been doing for many, many years?
Yeah, we were involved very much in conjunction with Dairy NZ and other dairy companies as well, and obviously with other groups as well. And I think most of us were really on the same page with this. And for example, the dairy industry is very supportive of farm environment plans. Every farm having a farm environment plan. It's something we can't just flick a switch and do instantly, but it's certainly something that we would like to see. And I guess in terms of being heard, I think we do feel like we were heard at the other end of the process. Still some challenging things in there. I mean, really to us, most of the weight should go, and the way forward is farm environment plans. When you have someone trained working with a farm who's willing, identifying those environmental risks for their specific farm, and then just getting stuck in and addressing those, to us is actually the number one way to get on top of these things. Because if you're doing that, then you're doing the very best you can to keep your nutrients where they need to be on your farm. And yeah.
Every farm is very individual, and of course there's a lot of learnings that continuously evolve, and so does science and research. What are you doing to extend the knowledge from farmers onto the wider supplier group as those types of sort of findings and success stories are found?
Yeah. Well, we often say, I mean, we do a lot of extension work and talk to a lot of people, but actually the best ideas come from farmers themselves. So it's always been the way in the industry we're in. Give farmers a problem and they'll find a solution. So a lot of what my guys are doing are gathering up that really good learnings that other farms have done, and then actually passing it on in an easy way to other farmers.
Now, of course, this has been...
I think that's probably the best way to explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is consumer-led, isn't it? And I mean, Synlait are certainly doing this for a reason, that consumers are demanding it. And as you said, there's a lot of social sides to the Lead with Pride program. How important is it that you're ahead of the game, listening on the ground to what other things might continue to emerge in the likes of, say, animal welfare as well?
So Lead with Pride is very much an evolving program, and we change it every year in consultation with farmers, and usually the things that are changed are things that they're expecting, because they're seeing them in the media, and this next thing coming up, and it's expected. The odd time there is something that a specific customer does want, where we will need to make that change, but it is certainly the customer is a big part of this, but it's also about, for us, when we started, a lot of it was about the community we live in as well, and showing the community that we live in that farmers are doing the best they can. That was probably one of our biggest drivers, and they're kind of aligned. If you get community on board with what you're doing, you're probably going to be heading in the same direction as what customers and consumers expect.
And of course, things do take time to transition. So as what I was trying to lead to with trends, how to bring your farmers along this journey, that these may be the new things coming forward. Last night we really concentrated with Steve Carden from Pāmu and Malcolm Ellis with the demand at LIC for sex semen in terms of this drive to reduce bobby calves. Is Synlait getting involved in that particular trend?
So one of the ways that we try and look at these trends is actually create a self-assessment for farmers to go through. So we make completing the self-assessment part of the program, but that's all they have to do. They just have to complete it, and so that's what we've done with that bobby calf area. Is we ask farmers to complete a self-assessment every year. So quite a thorough process where they look at, could I actually rear some more calves? What would be the impact on my business in terms of people, my facilities, and profitability? And can I actually just rear a few more calves? And obviously thrown into those conversations are some of the that technology like sex semen and good, really good bull semen that is now available comes into that conversation. And what we've found is that there's no compulsion there. Farmers they can still continue to do what they're doing. But what we've found is a lot of farmers have, because they've had to think it through, they've actually gone, yeah, actually we can do this, and we can do it profitably in many cases as well. So that's the way that we sort of approach those trends that we can see coming, but there's not right now there isn't enough to say, right, we can't have any more bobby calves, for example, and we can't see that in the immediate future. But it does mean that we've started that discussion and we've started along that pathway, because it is the amount of calves that we generate and don't add value to is a bit of a risk to our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I'm just thinking around the DIRA changes, which don't directly affect Synlait as much, but do you believe that we have enough mechanisms in place to pull the bottom up with us?
So, yeah, it was great to see those changes within DIRA. So Fonterra can change will refuse people because they don't meet their terms of supply. I think, and so that was great to see, but our thought has always been that rather than focusing a lot of time at the bottom end, is pull the top end up further. That's really what we've been trying to do with Lead with Pride, and I think we're successfully seeing that with the big, the big group in the middle are moving that way, and we are definitely starting to see the bottom come up as well. I guess the lower end performers, the best way to get them to perform is their neighbour tells them that actually this is really good for you, it will be good for you. So coming directly from a farmer is far better than us ever telling them that it's good for them. So that's been our approach, is try and work with the top end.
Absolutely, and I'm sure there are rural service professionals around them as well, and if it's good on a triple bottom line, then of course it's good for everyone.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Ceres Country. David Williams is the National Milk Supply Manager for Synlait, talking there as we're evolving to ensure the industry. Are we up and ready for these new national policy standards, or are they still worth fighting around the detail? Of course, an ongoing discussion. I'd love to hear your comments below. And of course, we will continue this conversation on Ceres Country. After the break, there's been news out today that Dairy NZ has had a win with the government, particularly with immigration, being able to get some dairy migrant workers in the borders. Will that be the same for rural contractors? They put in a bulk application and were turned down. We're getting very close and down to the wire when it comes to the spring labour shortage. We're going to have Roger Parton, CEO for Rural Contractors, up next. And I'd like to also talk to Roger. There is a very looming shortage with regards to getting parts in to this country, machinery parts that is, because of the delays in that freight coming into this country. Really feeling for our contractors out there. Looking forward to speaking to Roger after the break here on Ceres Country. This is Ceres Country.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
like electric fencing,
or horse feed,
or bee suits,
children,
chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help you farm,
grow,
Milk, dredge.
Rhea, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
For those who have just joined us live, welcome to Ceres Country. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Tonight's theme is about change. We know that change is inevitable, but are there some things that you wish wouldn't change? I'd love to hear about those in the comments below. I do have to share with you, the reason I absolutely love when I moved to Lincoln, I mean, I grew up in Cromwell, I grew up in Central Otago, Wanaka, Queenstown. Cromwell is a completely different place to where I grew up. And I love the feel of that rural community that this area still offers that has changed a lot from tourism. I mean, my heart and my family are still very much there. But, you know, I do cling on to some of those things that I was raised with. I'd love to know, what are those things that you were raised with that you still cling to in terms of surrounding yourself with in your community and your family? I'd love to hear. And welcome Renee White, who said hi. Hi, Renee. Thanks for joining the program. I'd love to hear, even wherever you are watching around the country. It's absolutely awesome to know where our viewers are spread across. And if you're new to Ceres Country, give us a sing out as well. Now, the government announcement today from Dairy NZ is that skilled migrant dairy farm employees are able to return to New Zealand from overseas. Is this an absolute kick in the guts to the bulk application from the Rural Contractors New Zealand last week to the government on behalf of its members to bring in its highly skilled foreign workers to reduce the extreme staff shortages going into spring. Well, hang on, last time I checked, we're already now in spring. Joining us to discuss is Roger Parton, fresh out of a board meeting. Roger, what are your members telling you in terms of their skill shortages, and how much is this a kick in the guts when dairy get this?
Good evening, Sarah. Well, the application that we put in was for some 206 highly skilled agricultural machinery operators to drive the big harvesters and the big balers and such like. We were told by the government that that we couldn't make a bulk application, that each individual contractor had to make their own application, which now a lot of them have done, and everyone has been declined. And they've been declined on the basis, A, that the work is not uniquely skilled and that there are obviously people in New Zealand who can do it. If there are, we'd love to hear from them. And B, if the work is not time critical. So according to the government officials, it doesn't matter whether you harvest in December and January when the crop's ready, or leave it for 2 or 3 months until April and May when the crop's gone rotten in the ground.
I think we should get Chris Farfoy into a tractor and see if he's worked out whether this is highly skilled or not. This is ridiculous, Roger.
I think one of my members suggested we get him into a baler, actually, which is probably a little bit more unkind. Yeah. But it's one of those things that it's not necessarily the minister himself who knows or understands. It's the officials. And we've had problems over many years trying to explain to them what this particular role is. When we were doing the approval in principles, we actually had to take photos along of harvesters and big tractors and such like to show them the machinery that's being operated. And it's not just a question of driving it from A to B, it's a question of fine-tuning it, making sure it's operated productively, safely and efficiently.
So we had Andy Pender on Sarah's Country last week, probably one of my favourite interviews so far this year, Roger, from the New Zealand Airline Pilots Association. Listening to his words in respect of, he said, driving one of those, an agricultural contracting machine, is way, way more than he believed landing a Boeing. You know, the respect for where the technology is and driving skills is now is coming from an airline pilot.
I know, and I've been working closely with the Airline Pilots Association and Andy over the last few weeks. We did that on the basis that there was obviously some skills in both occupations which could be matched, and we put the two together. We found a whole number of pilots who've got a wide variety of licenses. A number have come from farms and have big machinery in the past, and it was an opportunity to find them employment at the same time. Fill the slots that we need to fill. However, it's not quite that simple because a lot of these pilots are settled in their residences with their families in Auckland or Christchurch or wherever, and you know the work may be down in Winton or Oamaru, in the back block somewhere, and they, you know, to actually move them down there just for a 6-month period is highly disruptive to them, and a number of them just don't want to go.
Hey, so now let's talk about that, because we had Brian Cadogan, the Clutha District Mayor, on Sarah's Country last week, and they're pouring $500,000 of government funding into redeploying Queenstown's unemployed, especially coming off the ski season, into a jobs expo. And he believes that our industry is underestimating the past history potentially of some of the people that are stuck here from overseas that can't get home, that may have the ability to drive this. Is Rural Contractors New Zealand being open-hearted and open-minded to take a range of different skill sets and not just waiting for people to come from overseas?
Oh, I think we are, and what we've seen over the past few weeks is we had the SIT course in Telford, which was arose out of a couple of expos in Wanaka and Queenstown, and we had a number of people turn up from those. Some of them were from the hospitality, and some were just people who hadn't got a job at that stage. The skills in the hospitality sector may not transfer across all that easily. But if the person's willing to work and is willing to learn and has got, you know, the basic skills of being able to drive a vehicle, it's a very good start. And I've had over the last few weeks, ever since my name has been out there in the public arena over this particular issue, emails from people 65 plus with all their licenses who have driven harvesters in the past saying, can we help? And I've circulated these around. So we've been getting people in from all sorts of walks of life and ages and levels of experience. If they want to be considered for a job, I'm more than happy to circulate their CV to all of our members to see if we can slot them in somewhere.
What an absolute wonderful thing to hear, because, I mean, if you're 65 and you're planning on going to sail around the Greek islands and you can't do that, you may as well help out. And it's excellent to hear. I mean, the likes of, say, for instance, Joel, he's, he's stuck here from Northern Ireland, can't get home. He said to me, I couldn't drive a tractor. You should see what he does with in terms of switching all of that equipment and all the lights and things like that. I know that sounds silly, Roger, but there's a lot of people that underestimate their ability to come into our industry. And I'm really like to know that we are being open to people who are extremely willing, and like you said, to move to these areas as well, because some people have no choices.
I think there are a number of our members who have sort of got this mindset that they've always brought in people from overseas because they haven't been able to get them in New Zealand, and that's the only way of doing it. I don't believe that to be the case. I think we probably still need some people from overseas to fill in the shortfall. But we're looking at every opportunity, and some of these machines are highly technical, and if can flick switches and manipulate electronics, that's one of the things that they need to do in the cab these days, because they're very, very sophisticated bits of machinery.
Okay, so when you had your board meeting, were you able to get a bit of an understanding around the numbers and what it's going to look like for the season ahead? I mean, we're here already.
No, we haven't got any numbers as such. I've been canvassing members recently to find out how they've been getting on, with the airline pilots and also with the applications. As I say, the applications have all been knocked back. There's 2 or 3 who have picked up airline pilots so far, and I think there's some more, working their way through it. But it's. I think we'll probably end up with a shortfall, and the things that concerns me about that is that people will then either start using people who are not qualified and competent to drive the big machines, or they will drive them themselves, and you'll end up with a fatigue management issue. And either of those cases could be quite tragic, and that's the last thing we want.
Roger, are you talking closely with WorkSafe about this? With regards to your general concerns?
Not, because I know exactly what WorkSafe will say. They'll say the person conducting a business and an undertaking must ensure that the individual using the equipment is competent. But if you haven't got anybody who's competent, what are you going to do with it? And that's not WorkSafe's problem.
Roger, on behalf of
at the end of the day, it probably sheets home to the government.
Roger, I just wanted to say on behalf of the audience, we extremely feel your frustration, and I want to follow this closely, especially with today, this announcement coming through for dairy migrants to be able to come through. Why can't rural contractors be able to bring in those extremely highly skilled migrant workers that we need? And of course, I keep going on about it here. It's a health and safety issue, and the stress is getting real. Roger, thank you so much for what you do in your role, and to every one of your team at Rural Contractors New Zealand. It's an extremely stressful time, and please keep your chin up and keep the fight real, because it absolutely is. And coming up after the break, we're going to be joined by Chris Claridge, CEO for Potatoes New Zealand, who is representing a wide group of vegetable growers who've been happily given $4.7 million on top of previous funding. This is to ensure that the nitrate leaching from vegetable growing management systems is under control and will be improving on the way forward. Chris Claridge joins us up next on Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country. The recipe for perfect beef and lamb. Take 1 small fresh country. make sure it's nice and remote. Now, keep it at the ideal temperature all year round. Next, mix in the farmers. They go perfectly with the nature of this unique place. Add regular sprinkles of rain to really bring out the lush meadow grass. Then let your animals happily graze on this grass all day, every day. And there you have it, New Zealand, the perfect recipe for beef and lamb. Taste pure nature.
Well, New Zealand vegetable growers have had a cash injection of $4.7 million from MPI recently, and this is to help transition crop production into more sustainable land management. Joining us now is CEO for Potatoes New Zealand, Chris Claridge, to discuss this further. Chris, how long has this been in the process, this particular sustainable vegetable systems project?
So around about September last year, almost 12 months ago, we were instructed by growers to work out how much nitrate was being leached out of potato and vegetable crops. And we were given quite a clear direction by the industry. Let's actually work out how much nitrogen is being leached out of vegetable crop systems. And let's look at the current modelling systems, and let's use scientific information to inform potential mitigations and also to improve the current modelling tools so we can more accurately project what's going on. And that's what we straight away started a potato project, and we've got some preliminary results that were good. And that has informed a larger project, which is the Sustainable Vegetable Systems Project, which is supported by Horticulture New Zealand, Onions New Zealand, Vegetables New Zealand, the New Zealand Buttercup Squash Council, and also Processed Vegetables New Zealand. So the entire vegetable sector's got behind this. So we want to work out what are the actual amounts leaching out of the bottom of vegetable crop rotations, and working out how to better predict and also mitigate nitrogen leaching going forward.
Because for those who are not aware, vegetable growing in a smaller concentrated area does have a higher nitrate leaching profile than particularly pastoral farming and arable farming. Am I right?
Well, yes and no. So you're partly right. So some vegetable cropping systems can result in high levels of nitrate leaching, but what we are swiftly discovering is we can actually design vegetable rotation systems that can meet the regulatory limits that are being set, and also meet the national standards which have been putting in place. In other words, we believe that vegetables can work out ways of mitigating the leaching and therefore meet the regulatory frameworks that are coming in. And in the case of potatoes, we're getting some really good figures. We've improved the projection models so that they're better and more accurate. And we're getting some really low readings from potato crops now, which is really assisting us in showing that vegetable cropping has a role to play, and it's not going to harm the environment, which is a critical message we think should be picked up, that potatoes are good for you and they're good for the land.
Now, multi-land use is very much a part of New Zealand's future farm management systems, and we actually went to a organic vegetable growing collective near Leiston to realise that they do retire in a rotation with livestock. Do you want to see that type of thing become more and more with the collective that is part of this funding, that we can move into more systems as opposed to monocropping vegetables?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking at is we're running a number of work streams, and the first series of work streams, the first work stream is with plant and food. So using controlled experimentation to work out what is actually dropping out of the vegetable crop rotations and controlled measurement. And then we've got 9 different regions where we're looking to monitor out in the fields, and we're monitoring in Pukekohe, we're monitoring in Matamata, in Hawke's Bay, in Horowhenua, and then down in Canterbury to see what actual rotations generate in terms of leaching, and then identifying, using that scientific data, how best to improve the tools to predict, and also what potential mitigation techniques we can adopt.
Fantastic. And I mean, what type of outcomes would you like to see from this particular funding? It's a 4-year project.
Yeah, so this is quite a focused project, which is about trying to work out the environmental impact of intensive vegetable growing and different rotations in different regions. Because what we've found is that different regions generate different results. So you've got to adapt your rotation systems to suit what is possible to grow in that region, and also what the market requirements are for that region, and also what the regulatory requirements for that region are. So this is about being adaptive and responding to what the signals we're getting from the central government and also local government in terms of requirements for freshwater standards. So,
yeah, let's talk about that in terms of freshwater standards, because, I mean, if you're a livestock farmer, you're feeling pretty beaten up when vegetables and arable have been nearly exempt from these new standards. How do you feel about that?
Well, I wouldn't say that we're exempt from those standards, because we're going through plan changes. We've got plan change 1 in the Waikato. We're currently going through plan change 2 in Horizons, and commercial vegetable production is going through plan change 7. So the vegetable the vegetable sector, and potatoes is included in that, is faced with meeting the regulatory requirements of the regional standards, regional councils, and meeting those national standards. And we're being proactive to identify how we can meet those standards and how we can improve what we do to make sure that we reduce our environmental footprint over time. But what we need to do is first get the science in place. What are we actually leaching? What are the models like Overseer? Are they accurate? How do we improve those? And if they're not suitable for a particular vegetable rotation system, what other models could we use? And then going forward, how do we mitigate, and how do we head to those targets that as industries we've adopted? And in the case of potatoes, we've adopted a 0 net emissions by 2050. So we're looking to see how can we, moving forward as an industry, reduce our environmental footprint in order to meet that social and regulatory license, which is so critical to operate.
Now, Chris, I do have to ask, we're missing, for those who do follow Chris being a part of Sarah's Country, we have a different backdrop. You're here in Canterbury, crossing across to us tonight, as opposed to your musical background that you normally have on set. What brings you down here? What have you been up to today, getting around your growers, and how are they faring with, last time we chat, it's about this dumping of fries and the fearfulness of a globalisation and nationalisation problem across the spud industry?
Well, I've had one of those days which was just so wonderful that it sort of makes the whole job really worthwhile. So we started off last night in Ashburton with a meeting of growers. We were talking about Plan Change 7 and working out what the growers were concerned about and walking them through the regulatory changes proposed by the regional council and working out what our approach to it was. And then we spent the day visiting the potato processors today. So this morning I've been at McCain's in Washdike, Timaru, meeting the wonderful team down there and the McCain's crew who generate wonderful fries. Then we went around the corner and met with Heartland chips, which, and unfortunately I don't have any to show you, but we've been busily eating them as we've been driving around. The wonderful team at Heartland Chips who produce the Heartland brand. And we were very lucky to be able to test some of their new product. So the Bowen family who run that plant, again, we were talking to them about the impact of the plan change and what that would mean to them. And then we met with Makihi Fries. And then last we were at Tally's. So we've been going through the processes because in the potato industry, we recognise that it's not only the growers that face these regulatory climate, but also the processors. So it's trying to work out as an industry how we respond to it and how we adapt and manage the change process of bringing industries into this new environment where we've got to be responsible and we've got to make sure that we meet those environmental settings that central government and indeed the consumers are saying to us that we've got to meet.
It's actually a real theme of tonight, Chris. We're talking about change in general. You would have heard earlier we're talking about that. And I mean, there's got to be some things though that we can't change. That makes us Kiwi, that makes us just, like sure, change is important, but fundamentally we've got to be nostalgic about some things.
Well, I think for the primary sector in New Zealand, we've always been subjected to change, and change is constant in our world. The weather changes, patterns change, and consumers change. And I think as a country, our ability to adapt and be flexible and learn how to operate in a new world with what consumers want and what our customers want worldwide is absolutely critical. So I think we have to embrace change, learn from the past, absolutely, but don't get stuck in the past. Try and adapt and change and modify. Now, as you get older, that gets pretty difficult to cope with change. It's because it's deeply unsettling. But I think it's critical as an industry, we take the opportunity of COVID-19, we look closely at what's been happening and adapt for this new environment. And I think that if we are careful about it, we can position New Zealand very well for the future. I think as well, people are recognising that the primary sector is the key to economic growth and therefore for better social well-being. So I think the primary sector, if it embraces the challenges that it's in front of it, these regulatory and environmental challenges, I think we can position ourselves very well for the future. I'm actually very positive about going forward.
You're telling me that you will not be listening to the same music now when you're in your 80s, though? I mean, there are some things you wouldn't change.
Well, there's elements of life which that it's great to look back, but you can't live in the past. You have to live in the now, and you have to embrace the future and the change. To me, yes, you can listen to the odd song or music from your past, but listening to what's current and keeping up is part of life. And I think resistance to change is not a good place to be. I don't think that's an issue of age. I don't think it's an issue of gender. I don't think it's an issue of ethnicity. We have to embrace the future because that's where success comes from.
Thank you so much, CEO for Potatoes New Zealand, Chris Claridge. And I'm looking forward to speaking to our next guest, another Chris from Federated Farmers after the break, he wears many hats, this Chris Allen, spokesman for pest management. I'd love to get his thoughts on this, because if we had listened 30 years ago around a lot of things that would happen and be the consequences if we continued to do what we do, we probably wouldn't be in the same position. And this is with Wilding Pines. All that after the break.
This is Sarah's Country.
pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey.
Do you reckon it'll come out?
Cover it and tell Compare to leave it 10 minutes. You'll be fine.
Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Thank you so much for your participation live in the comments. Love knowing that you're here along with us. Of course, some of the serious issues that we are discussing on Sarah's Country, I don't know about you, but that really flabbergasted me around what's happening with rural contractors. Now, we have a comment here that Michael worked in the UK at high-level meetings equivalent to MPI, and no one at the meeting had been on a farm in the past 5 years, yet they were setting policy about farming. I understood from a conversation I had with Jacqueline Routh that we're in a similar situation here in New Zealand, right back to when they changed law, whereby you didn't need to have experience or qualifications in a particular industry to work in a particular portfolio. And that has certainly led to a lot of changes. Rural proofing, Damien O'Connor, rural proofing policy. Have we really seen that? I'd love to put that to him as we've seen this. Now, we're also talking about change. Do we like change? We know change is inevitable. What things would we like to hold on to? And I really want to challenge this particular comment. Jock said that walking half a mile in bare feet on gravel roads is something that he misses. No electricity, no chainsaw. You know, Jock, you can still do that if you like. You know, we still have gravel roads and you just take your shoes off. Though I know I'm being silly, but absolutely some of those good old days in terms of a lot of the comments are to do with small communities when everybody knew each other, when there was a bonfire, the entire community came together. And certainly our rural towns have changed for the better or the worse. Now, of course, looking back in history, would we have seen hindsight should now from the learnings around our pest management, and we're talking about pest management from a lot of different factors, but in particular in this story is around wilding pines. Annette Scott has a story called Wilding Pine, Just the Iceberg on farmersweekly.co.nz. You see an image there of heli spraying wildings in Molesworth. It is absolutely spreading like wildfire, and please excuse the pun, what we've seen in the Mackenzie country. But Damien O'Connor, Biosecurity Minister, has come out to say that it is now about jobs. 550 jobs will be able to tackle the 800,000 hectares of wilding pine infestations. But federated farmers are saying it is not far enough. And joining us, spokesperson for pest management, is Chris Allen. Chris, could we have avoided the situation we are in today?
Good evening, Sarah. Look, it's one of those things that's just been manifesting itself over many, many decades. But there's been a great process set up with governance, with all those key landowners in there. And the government is actually, or the taxpayer, is a really big landowner that's involved in this. We've got the Department of Conservation, we've got Land Information New Zealand. So those are two really key government departments that have got a lot of land. So whether you're talking about the Molesworth, well, Doc own that. And we've got private landowners. So having a governance group that actually can work out what the problem is and how to advise the government what the best process is and how to move this forward. And we've got to make a start. And we have made a start over the last 3 years. Now it's the time to step it up, but it just doesn't stop in 4 years' time. It's a long-term process, this one.
I know. I mean, I do have to say, I grew up in the high country, and Philip Todd Hunter from the High Country Accord with what's happening with 10-year review really struck a chord for me in regards to the amount of money that high country farmers put into their own pest management in these leasehold pastoral leases every year to ensure that these things don't get out of control. We're not just talking about wilding pines, pigs, gorse, broom, etc. And for the government to just turn around now and throw money at the problem, why wouldn't that be the solution?
Well, it's been the solution for a long time, but the farmers just haven't got the money. their resources are just so stretched. And like you say, the rabbits, that can gobble up a massive amount of money. Gorse, how much time and effort do you want to spend doing that? All these things are all connected. And it's all very well the taxpayer saying, yeah, that's going to cost us $100 million to do that. You've got to put that on the back of the best public-private partnership the country's ever seen, which is the landowner trying to do what they can for managing pests. So it's not all about the conservation estate, it's the landowners who are doing a lot of this work as well. But we've got to start somewhere. In 50 years' time, we will still be eradicating wilding pines, but the more seeding that's going on, the further that they spread, the bigger the problem becomes.
Is this really about finding work for people, and is this money enough?
It's the money that the government put up is what was advised by the government's group, that code group. Federated Farmers is one of the participants on that. So they said this is a really good place to start. Get the right tree in the right place, and we've got to get rid of some of those. So I think it is going to be the right amount of money, but the jobs, a lot of forestry crews back during COVID time, there was hiccups with export. So those guys had chainsaws, or gals, they had chainsaws, they were ready to go, they needed something to do. Isn't it just almost, it's a no-brainer. Whether you say they're new jobs, well, it's actually just making sure that they don't actually need to go on the dole. Why pay them to go on the dole when we've got something else that really needs to be done now?
Okay, so let's look at the scenario. The government's spending a lot of money in terms of wilding pines, yet news on Farmers Weekly is that Minister Eugenie Sage, the Minister for Conservation, is locking up a massive land park in the Mackenzie country. What's to say that's not going to take off in wilding pines and affect neighbouring properties?
Well, there becomes a problem. One part of it is part of government can say, yep, we can afford to go to the Natural Heritage Fund and get the money out of that and buy the land. The other side of it, the conservation budget needs to be expanded so they can look after wilding conifers. Where farmers coexist with grazing pressures with stock, they keep a lot of the trees under control. So there's going to have to be other mechanisms found to make sure that the trees don't get out of control. The seed's just sitting on the ground waiting to go.
We talked yesterday, and it got quite a few of our viewers hot under the collar when we were speaking to Danny Templeman from Osprey with regards to not the transfer of TB from feral pigs, but that is basically like a litmus test that there is TB in this area, and the responsibility of landowners, regardless of who they are, whether it's the Crown or Māori or forestry owners bounding livestock properties, to ensure that we can actually eradicate TB from this country. Flying around with helicopters is only going to mix everything up, especially when an overpopulation of deer as well. From a wider pest management situation, how concerned are you?
Look, I've just heard of a case just in the last couple of weeks where there's forestry blocks, those forestry blocks have been milled, and good on them, they've done their 30 years and it's time for them to come down. There's also got 10-year review lands there, and we've got wilding conifers. The helicopters going out there and spraying those, and it's just one big herding operation. So the pigs are coming down onto the private farmland. So there's some of the pig numbers that I'm hearing are just absolutely phenomenal. You wouldn't think there'd be that many living there. So the whole thing, all these things are all interconnected. Forestry, there's a place for it, and they've got to manage the pests in there. We've got 10-year review. Yes, we've got to manage that. We've got private farmland. But it's not just about wilding conifers that we've got to worry about. It's the whole pest management strategy so that everything is looked after, because otherwise you end up with farmers taking a full brunt for lots of things that are getting muddled onto their properties.
Okay, so in your ideal world, Chris, if you were to create the ideal scenario for governance and policy in an ecosystem that affects pest management across the board, how would you be able to manage this, that it's not just a throw a bit of money here and a policy there?
Look, there's some really great meaning legs of government, and they can do really good things in their silo. But there's lots of little silos, and we've just been talking about 4 little silos there. Yeah, we're talking about the deer, we're talking about the pigs, we're talking about conifers, and probably let's talk about Horatium and a few of the other really gnarly weeds that are out there. It's having that coordinated pest management strategy where all the key stakeholders in the room, Department of Conservation, the LINs, the private landowners, the regional councils, they've all got a part to play in how they put that strategy together, so that, and the government or the taxpayer needs to help. You can't just rely on the ratepayer, and you can't just rely on the individual landowner. So it's actually what the government's group of the wilding conifers has come up with is a really good recipe of how to address one aspect of it, but it probably needs to be scaled up. Got to get some runs on the board, got to get these tree numbers down.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. Before you sneak away, though, we are talking about change. There's certain things about how we are in rural New Zealand that we shouldn't change. What are they in your mind that make us special? We should always hold on to.
One thing that makes me really proud to be in a rural community is our sense of community values. And you look at just a fundraising exercise that's going on, whether it be supporting the local hospice, whether it be looking at the local rugby club, whether it be the fire brigade, or the local school. Yeah, the local schools that centre focus don't do away with the local board of trustees or those local governance groups. It's a great way for social contact in our rural communities. That we might say we're busy, we've got to go out to a meeting here or there. It's a great way to keep in touch and feel the heartbeat of your community. And the other one I'd say is don't forget to laugh. Yeah, there's a lot of serious stuff going on in this world, and sometimes when something comes out of government, you've just got to laugh, because if you soaked it all up, I think we'd be in tears a lot of the time. But nothing like a good laugh, and you can help you get it through, and tomorrow the sun will rise.
Thank you so much, Chris. I mean, I know there'll be a few people listening going, quite a few things that come out of government are laughable for different reasons, but I totally appreciate what a wonderful way to end that. I just want to say one thing I don't think we should ever change is I don't think we should ever change listening to our elders. You wouldn't have thought I would say that, but absolutely, should we listen more and more to our elders, we may not be in certain circumstances that we could have avoided. And I say that with absolute respect, following my intro when I met the 83-year-old who didn't want to stop using his cheques this morning, and bless his absolute cotton socks. It was a very touching moment about how far we've come and how we should support each other through change. And I think that's a really huge part I want to do in my role with Ceres Country, open hearts and open minds, and taking every single one of us along this journey together, consumer, producer, urban, rural. This is what we're all about here at Ceres Country. Of course, produced in alliance with the fantastic team at Global HQ, Home to Farmers Weekly, Dairy Farmer, and of course, Agri HQ. Make sure you check them out. And of course, on demand on podcasts, you can download and take us on the road wherever you are. And thank you so much to our growing huge audience on demand on podcast. We absolutely value how fast this thing is growing, and I absolutely treasure it. Please email me at my new email address, sarah@cerescountry.com. Bit easier to say. cerescountry.com for all of your on-demand interviews. If you've missed any of them, head back there. And of course, we are following along with all of the matters that matter most, farming, food and fibre here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of the show, and we will see you again on Monday from 7 o'clock. In the meantime, look after yourselves and look after each other. Good night and go well.
This is Ceres Country.